My guest is Bob Bradicich, a World War II veteran and a special friend. Bob, welcome to our show.
Thank you.
We're really glad you're here.
Pleasure to be here.
Let's take our viewers back to 1943. And you're a young man. The war is in the middle of the 4 or 5 years of World War II. Tell us your future and what happened with you then.
Well, when the war broke out, I was only 17, and I was waiting to go into the Army. My brother went into the Army, and I wanted to go, and I went to join, and they said, you have to go back and get your father's permission.
Because you're too young.
Because I was much too young, and I looked young, too.
Sure.
So I went back, and my father would not sign for me because he says, I got one brother and one son in the Army, I don't want another son. But I said, Dad, it's only a matter of time, and they're going to take me. So he said no, he wouldn't. I couldn't convince him to let me go. Come March, I got my letter from the government that they want me.
You were drafted.
I was drafted into the Army. I knew it was coming sooner or later. And I was drafted into the Army, and they sent me down to Camp Landing, Florida, where I took my basic training.
And the same is true of thousands of young men of that era.
Yes. At the time the war broke out, there was literally lines of men signing up around the block trying to get in.
Yeah.
My brother took basic training with a wooden rifle because we didn't have enough to go around.
Wow.
It was so quick.
So you received infantry training and you were sent to Europe.
I was sent to 28th Infantry Division, and we organized there, and then we went over to England.
Right.
Okay.
On the way over, we talked about this prior to the show. You rode over on what you call a banana boat.
Yes, a banana boat. We call it a banana boat. This is a boat that usually takes fruit or some kind of produce from South America, and they bring it up here to New York or to the United States, and that's converted over to a, quote, troop ship. So I was on there, and we went over there. It took me 10 days to get over there, and we hit a storm, and 95% of the guys were seasick. One died from seasickness because it was that bad. But
the idea being that civilian ships and other items were converted for military use.
Yes.
So it wasn't a conventional troop carrier, it was a banana boat.
That's correct.
All right.
That's correct.
You landed, you spent time in Wales in training.
I spent time in, Pembroke Dock, South Wales.
And you and your infantrymen ultimately landed on the European continent, in France.
Yes.
Let's talk about that for just a moment.
Well, when the war, we were waiting to invade France, but it never came right away. Finally, the 29th Infantry invaded France at Omaha Beach, and we were ready to go right behind them. If the 29th Infantry didn't make it, we were going to go right in and take over from them. In any event, we did finally take over from the 29th Infantry at Omaha Beach. And then we proceeded down there to St. Lo. We joined up with the 2nd Armored Division, and we spearheaded out of the beachhead. So we broke the beachhead, and we took our first town, Percy, France.
You spent the next year or more in combat, some of it very fierce.
Yes.
Occasionally you had a little time off, thankfully.
Yes, we did, R&R.
And I don't want you to be too personal, but you were awarded the Bronze Star,
yes, sir.
Of which I absolutely salute you.
Yeah.
Could you tell our viewers just a little bit about how that came about?
Well, after we liberated Paris and we went on to Belgium and Luxembourg, we were given an assignment in the Hurtgen Forest, where it was cold, 0 degrees weather, and the pine needles covered the ground.
You lost a lot of men there, didn't you?
Yes, we lost a lot of men, and our feet became frozen.
Right.
You take your shoes off, and they swell up, and you can't get your shoes back on. They had 4 guys out there, out in the outpost for artillery observers, and the captain asked for a volunteer to go and get them out because all communications were out, and we were being pulled off the line.
Right.
So I went up there, and as I'm going up, I met a German tank, and not a German, an American tank, and they told us we can't go any further. I told them what I had to do, and so I kept on going.
You went anyway.
I went anyway. I got behind the German lines, and I was looking for the guys to take out. Finally, I heard something up the road, and I immediately thought they were Germans, but these were the 4 guys I was looking for. So we got them. I told them what I was here, and we were pulling out, and we want to get you down here. So on the way back down here, we had to go through the enemy lines again to get back down to it. And the Germans spotted us, and they fired at us.
Sure.
Now, as they fired on us, we returned the fire. Because anytime you fire at somebody, they're going to duck, okay? So I fired at them, and they brought a tank up, a German tank, and they shot their 88. That's an artillery piece that's on the tank at us, and unfortunately, it got one of our men.
But ultimately,
one of the 4 people that I was getting out.
Ultimately, you were able to get the others back.
Yes, and we took them. I told them to bring him back down towards the tank. I was going to stay there and fire at the enemy to keep them pinned down so you can get out.
Now, when we spoke before getting together today, you told me about a period of R&R, which we call rest and relaxation.
Yeah.
And the unusual thing that you told me was that while you and the Germans were in very close proximity, there seemed to be a quiet understanding that you guys would take some time off and they would too. How'd that work?
Well, after the Hurricane Forest, we were put out onto what we call R&R along the Luxembourg-Belgium borders. Now, normally we take 10 miles that we cover the division. This time we had 30 miles, but it was still on the front, but it was a quiet front. We could see the Germans over on the other side. There was a little river there on the other side, and they could see us.
Okay.
But there was no firing. It was like a mutual agreement because we were waiting for the spring.
Okay. So it was the cold of winter, and both parties were waiting for warm weather.
That's correct. That's correct.
I think that's very interesting. Yeah. You also mentioned Luxembourg and Belgium just a moment ago, and you mentioned their love for American soldiers.
Yes, I found that to be very heartwarming because while we were in Belgium, Luxembourg, on December the 6th, the Germans came through us with a blitzkrieg, and they surrounded us, and they were taking prisoners, they were killing all our men. And when we were behind the enemy lines, and if we see Germans, or it's cold and you want to get warm or do something, some Belgian people or Luxembourg people asked us in, and they fed us. And after they fed us, they hid us from the Germans. So the Germans came in and they no, nothing here.
It's extraordinary.
Now, they did this on their own. If they were caught, that whole family would be shot, and the Americans along with them.
Well, I'm sure...
So they put their lives on the line.
I'm sure Europeans of all stripes were grateful, but it's interesting that you talk about those in Luxembourg.
They're the greatest people you want to find.
That's terrific. You returned back from the war in good health.
Yes, I did.
You had several very successful careers. I want our viewers to know about those.
You mean when I come back and I
Yes,
went to work?
sir. Right.
Well, yes, when I come back to work, they say you get the same job when you leave. Well, when I left, I didn't have a job, so when I came back, I didn't have a job. But I managed to go out and find a place here and there. I went around. I finally hooked up with Aramco.
Well, first off, you went to college.
Yes, before that, yes. I did under the GI Bill.
Thank you.
I went to college at New York University, and I got everything out that I was supposed to get out, and then I went looking for jobs, and I hooked up with the Aramco, Arabian American Oil Company. After 10 years with them, they were going to move the headquarters where I worked over to Arabia. And I didn't want to take myself, my family, my son and daughter over there. So I said no. So they said, well, you're going to look for a job. I hooked up then with IBM. And I worked for IBM for 30 years. And they were good to me, and I was good to them. And
it was a very successful career.
It was a very successful 30 years of work.
Yeah. I can see from your ribbons and your hat that you're a proud veteran, and my guess is you stay in touch with veterans here in the area. Am I right?
Yes, I do. I'm a member of the American Legion. I'm a member of the VFW, and I'm a member of a group in Wilmington, World War II Remembered. They have a group there that I go to. I go to all their meetings, and every year I go up to Indiantown Gap, and they have meetings up there once a year for the 28th Infantry Division.
Bob, we want our viewers to know about the book that you wrote as well. It's entitled World War II as I Lived It. These are two different pictures of Bob Bradicich now and Bob Bradicich as a young man.
That's correct, yes.
Tell us a little bit about the book and how you wrote it.
Well, the book, see, when I came out of the service, I didn't speak about the service for about 50 years. I just didn't want any part of it, you know. And then I was sitting down at the table and I was talking with my daughter, telling her about it, and she says, Dad, don't tell me, write it down so nobody forgets about it. That's what started me off. Then 10 years later, I finished this book, and it's been accepted by a lot of people, and they really enjoy reading it to find out just what happened during the war with one soldier.
You were kind enough to share a copy with me a year or two ago,
yes,
and I certainly enjoyed it.
Good, no, thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about the fact that you're among the few of our veterans. We're losing veterans every day, and you and your fellow veterans just have, as I said, a great story to tell. How do you look back on those years, personally? Were they difficult? Were they?
It was difficult, but right now it's like when I first there, I wouldn't do it. I would do it again, but it's something that had to be done, and every American at that time went and answered the call.
Yeah, I want to talk about that as well. I want to talk about the very united effort of all our civilians and all of our moms and mothers and young adults back home and what they were doing while you were engaging in fierce battles.
Well, they were on rations. They couldn't get butter. It was very hard to get butter and fat and things like that because they were used for ammunition. And they even had a thing, to the kids and for the people, you want to come to the show, bring an aluminum pan, aluminum pot, and you get in free.
Now tell us why that was the case.
And that was the case because that aluminum was used for planes, for construction, and for...
Sure, it was collected for the war effort.
It was collected for the war effort,
yeah.
Yes, it was.
And what little bit I know, having read and seen movies, is that the country came behind our war effort in a way that we
you could not imagine today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because everybody was there, was for the war. Before the war, there was a lot of people that was stay out of this war. You know, it's not our war. Let them fight it. But when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, it united the United States like you've never seen before.
Yeah, that's
we're all behind it, and we all went in there and do it.
So very powerful.
Yes.
Do you remember a couple of your fellow soldiers that you spent months and months with?
Yes, I do.
Mention one or two of them.
Luke Lender. There's a guy I would never forget. Joe Fay, he was another guy. He was killed in Percy, France, our first town that we took. But Luke Lender saved my life because during the breakthrough, we put up defensive positions. Then the Germans hit us with a blitzkrieg, and we go through it. Then we set up another defensive, slowing them down in the breakthrough so the 101st could get into Bastogne.
How did he save your life?
As he did this, the Germans came through us, and it was foggy, and they came at us. And I remember this, and it's hard to speak about it, but they came at us with fixed bayonets. I had just finished my clip, and I was trying to put another clip of ammunition into my rifle. And this German came at me with his bayonet. Lou was there with me, and he was lucky that he shot the German. Otherwise, I don't think I would be here right now.
Right.
So he saved my life. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty,
Captain Dobbs also did the same thing. He got us all out.
pretty remarkable stories.
Yes.
Bob, our time is just about concluded. I can't thank you enough for being with us this morning. You were and are an American hero, and I thank you for the privilege of
I thank you, and I'd like to say that all of the heroes are still in France under the ground.
Thank you, sir.
Believe me, they are.
You're right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.